Day 361 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And first of all, we'll head over to the Russian military losses as we continue to take a look at the exhaustion of the Russian forces, currently sitting on 142,860 Russian military personnel losses there, which is an addition of 590 in the past 24 hours, which includes 7 tanks, 12 APVs, and 1 artillery. So it's been a few extra pieces of hardware lost for Russia over the last few recent days' averages. Then we'll move across back to the map, and today we'll start out in the Russian region, so the region of Bashkortostan, so this area right here, about 1,000 miles-ish east of Moscow, the capital itself, where there was a major fire that broke out in this region. So it actually occurred at Russia's largest chemical plant. And it was just a mere few days ago when a research institute near the Moscow capital lit up as well. So maybe perhaps an experimental fuel propellant for use with military applications that didn't end up working out too well. Now, we don't exactly know the cause for this one, but one thing is for certain: Russia's fire safety standards are just horrendously atrocious. Then we'll move around on the map and we might just swing past Belarus for a moment and mention that Ukraine's intelligence has reported that Belarus has no means to invade Ukraine in the next 2 to 3 weeks, which is a time frame that would theoretically coincide with Russia looking to recommence a large new offensive invasion into Ukraine. And although the prospect of Belarus attacking into and invading into Ukraine is quite unlikely, it's made even more unlikely by the fact that Ukrainian forces have created well-fortified positions on their side of the border. Then we'll move across into Ukraine, into the Donbass we'll start at. So I might just quickly mention Soledar as well. As I've not really mentioned it in the past few updates, there's really just not a great deal going on here at the moment. And specifically, the January gains that Russian forces made here have clearly stalled. So it's true to say the Russian forces gained about 15 square miles of Soledar land last month, although this figure should probably be put in context because Russia has only taken about 30 square miles east of Soledar, including Soledar, in the last 6 months or so. Actually, since February 24th last year. Or, one could even argue, since Russia's Donbass invasion in 2014. Now, that's just me taking it a bit too far, sticking it to the comment trolls, but it's technically quite an accurate statement. Then we move across a little bit south to Bakhmut, where it's a similar story, but not exactly the same. So, Russian advances seem to have largely stalled in this town. A town that had a pre-war population of 70,000, which now sits at about 4,000 or so. There's a few remainders, civilians that just don't want to leave. And so Ukrainian forces have continued to keep Russian forces away from the southwest highway leading into the city of Bakhmut itself. And we even got some recent footage of a Ukrainian tank going up against Russian infantry near Bakhmut. So it appears the Russian infantry at this spot were sent into combat without any armor or anti-tank weapons for that matter. And are we surprised? No, not really. It's not an isolated incident, it's been happening more and more, and it would strongly appear that Russia hasn't yet received any resupply of tanks or other vehicles in any sort of useful numbers. Hence the attempted infantry storming sometimes. Although around here, one key location right now would be the settlement of Yahidne, right there north of Bakhmut. And it's where the available Wagner private army forces made some forward offensive moves in this location, as indicated by the protrusion, as you can see here. And it's really mere miles away from Bakhmut. In fact, maybe even just a mile from the north of the city. So let's see, 1.62 kilometers, almost exactly a mile from those northern outskirts of Bakhmut. So it remains to be seen if Russia can both hold and advance from this position without being subjected to the meat grinder. Because I can bet you right now, Ukrainian artillerists will be focusing on this position right here. Oh, and in this region as well, I might have missed it, but we have at Krasnohora. So Ukrainian artillery hit and destroyed a large ammunition depot just south of Krasnohora, around here near the bend of the highway. Then we'll move down south and we'll take a look at, say, Vuhledar. So there was small advancement attempts made by the Russian forces in the direction of Vuhledar, but they were wholly repelled by the Ukrainian forces. But then also, Katakovsky, a Russian commander in the south, recently sent a telegram message where he decided that the only way to take Vuhledar now is to destroy Vuhledar, using Mariupol as an example. So he feels burning it to the ground is the only way Russia can take it, as he says that urban warfare, going house to house and close quarters combat isn't going to work here. But a few things to note here. So Vuhledar itself is just about 10 streets in its size. So really, effectively, we're just talking about quite a very small village. And a 10-street village would not generally be considered an urban area for the purposes of urban warfare, as urban warfare typically refers to military operations in densely populated areas that provide copious amounts of cover. So this telegram message just seems like excuses for Russia's failed offensives in the region to me, for their excuses for how it's gone so far. Not to mention, Russian forces can't even reach the village anyway, because they're too busy rolling in with unplanned and uncoordinated offensives and simply physically, literally rolling over mines in the process. But does Russia care? Does Putin care? It would officially appear not, because the Russian military general, Morodov, who oversaw the throwing of Russian forces into the minefields over the past 2 weeks, causing 2 brigades and about 100 pieces of Russian hardware, heavy armor for instance, either being abandoned or destroyed. He didn't even get a slap on the wrist for this. Guess what happened to him instead? He literally just got promoted to the rank of Colonel General a week after the army's major defeat in Vuhledar, the Russian armies. So showing yet another example of how autocratic governments don't reward success or merit. Instead, they reward loyalty above all else. Meanwhile, Russia seems to have politically discarded their most successful military leader so far in this conflict, seedy Uncle Prigozhin. So the truth really is stranger than fiction. Then lastly in this region, just north of here in Marinka, so I have to pull that one up. So here we go in Marinka. Ukrainian forces destroyed a Russian T-90M by using a Javelin missile. Meanwhile, I'm just impressed there was a Russian T-90M tank on the battlefield. Arguably one of the best tanks Russia has to offer, if not the best tank in this war that they can offer. And so, not indestructible. Then we'll move across to the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, another front line there, of course. So, a Russian Grad multiple rocket launcher was hit by Ukrainian forces, allegedly taken out by an Excalibur strike in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Then in Berdyansk, so this location right here, just next to the Sea of Azov, a large Russian military barracks has mysteriously caught on fire, And it's a location which is technically out of range of a HIMARS missile by a factor of about 10%. So it's either Sergei the Smoker at it again, or some mysterious other weaponry Ukrainian seems to have its hot little hands on. But probably most importantly in the Zaporizhzhia region right now is roughly 40 busloads of Wagner PMC forces have just arrived in Melitopol. All excited, carrying their boomboxes, just going on, party-like atmosphere off the buses. And Russian sources are hinting towards an offensive there, and on the Zaporizhzhia front lines, of course. But 40 buses equals roughly 1,500 to 2,000 soldiers, which isn't even enough to cover the Vuhledar losses. So their cheery attitudes and boomboxes aren't likely to make any notable gains. And I'm not even joking about the boombox. I did some useless research on this one. It appears what one of the guys is holding is an older model of the JBL Party Box 300 boombox series. It has Bluetooth, LED lighting, and you guessed it, it's portable too. In fact, I think I almost want one now. But anyway, moving on to nearby in Mykolaiv. So a Russian missile was shot down in the south of Ukraine here. Here's a photo of the missile debris in the oblast, although the photo might instead be of the downed Russian missile, or the interceptor missile, say an S-300 air defense system missile of the Ukrainian forces. Then we'll move across to some news for the day. So UK PM Sunak was speaking at the Munich Security Conference today, saying the UK will be the first nation to provide long-range weapons to Ukraine. And top Russian propagandist Solovyov was not happy about that, obviously. And I'm really looking forward to the day when Ukraine gets supplied these longer range, high precision weapons that will reach all the way to Russia's internationally recognized borders. Russia will just lose so much military operational capability from that kind of new threat that they would suddenly find themselves a part of. Then in some other news, the US Secretary of State, Blinken, has warned China that providing any lethal aid to Russia for its war in Ukraine would have serious consequences in the US-China relationship. Now, for China's first batch of support items that we know that it's sent to Russia, I think the US let this one slide because it turned out to be really low quality helmets and body armor, some body armor of which turned out to be airsoft vests. But it's good to see the US drawing a line in the sand, likely a trade sanctions line. And it does appear that China is a little bit vulnerable in that department. First of all, you might be thinking of China as the factory of the world, which it absolutely is. It exports lots and lots. But it also has the heavy reliance on importing power like coal. We also have iron, metals, and also food. Lots and lots of food, produce, all sorts of things. A lot of the basic necessities, of which if they were to go without or have to pay a much higher price on the international world stage, then some analysts suggest China couldn't even last 6 to 12 months without the basic necessity goods. Then in another Russian military mobilization blunder, another appeal from Russian soldiers from the Russian Omsk region, who say they were trained as artillerymen, but then they get to Ukraine, and guess what happens? They turn into frontline men instead. And this is such a common story. Trained as one thing, then made into an entirely different unit. They then lose communication with their original commander. Then, quite commonly, they're placed under the so-called DPR's army, so the Donbass army, and under its control instead. And of course, they think there's some kind of mistake or great injustice that has befallen them. But no, they're just where their commanders want them to be, taking the heat on the Donbass front lines, fill in the gaps. Then in a bit of a quick funny to round it all off with, so today Uncle Luca came to visit Putin, where they both pledged closer ties for their countries amongst the backdrop of the 1 year almost anniversary of Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Isn't that sweet? But the content of their meeting isn't exactly what's entertaining here, but instead Putin, as always, in an uncontrolled environment, had his Parkinson's on display once again, moving his hands and feet somewhat wildly. Now, Putin's decline in health is still a subject up for debate. It's unconfirmed, it's not official, and really truly only speculation at this point. But for a guy that keeps a very strong, firm political composure with any of his discussions, with his speech, well, conversely, with his body language, I don't even think it's body language. This is uncontrolled mayhem. So with all of that said and done, he in that context, he's almost doing a bit of a tap dance here, isn't he, really? So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.